Let me give you a picture of why this law is a good thing. It's a solid thing. All right, anybody here ever been the recipient of this phrase from someone in the general public? It usually goes something like this. Tell me if you've ever heard this. You know, my tax dollars pay your salary. Anybody ever heard that? Okay, thank you. For all of you who've heard that, let me ask you another question. Has anybody here been told that statement currently not a taxpayer of any sort? Anybody here exempt from federal, state, local tax? No? Really? You guys all pay taxes? Wow, fascinating. I don't know if the public knows that sometimes, okay? Here's the thing. It's true. As public servants, whether you've been hired, elected, appointed, whatever, as public servants, yeah, we have some prohibitions. We have some restrictions, some responsibilities that maybe folks in the private sector don't have to worry about. I grant you that. But here's the bigger picture. As a fellow taxpayer, don't you have some rights under the ethics law too? Don't you have the right to expect that government's going to operate in a certain way? Take away your city involvement for a minute. Let's pretend that your business that you and your spouse own, you've applied for a grant from the Ohio Department of Development. Don't you as a taxpayer have the right to expect that you've got the same shot at getting that grant as somebody who applied whose spouse works for the Department of Development? Don't you have the right to expect that that ought to be an objective process? I think you do. I don't know if anybody here has ever dropped off your child at daycare or at school, or put your loved one on a school bus, or put your elderly parent in a facility of some sort to help take care of them. Somebody approved that facility as being safe where your loved one can be. Don't you want to know that whoever in government said, yes, this building is safe for habitation, don't you want to know that person had no personal financial gain at stake? Don't you want to know that was a completely objective decision? I do. I think I have that right as a taxpayer to demand that government should never be biased. That's the purpose. That's the benefit of this law. Now, I did have someone say to me once in a speech, well, Susan, that makes all kinds of sense to me. But then if that's the case, why don't we just get rid of all the biased public servants in Ohio? Okay, I'll get right on that. Does anybody know how many public servants there are in the state of Ohio altogether? Just about 700,000 of us, give or take. That's everything from, yeah, state employees, I'm a state employee, we're about 58,000, so we're well less than 10% of that number. But you're talking every county, every city, every township, every village has a government. Hired, elected, appointed, full-time, part-time, state boards and commissions, police departments, fire departments, public school districts, universities like this one. Almost 750,000 of us are subject to the ethics law based on our public service alone, okay? So, if I wanted to get rid of all of the biased public servants in the state, how many of that 700,000 we're going to have to get rid of? I would say about 700,000 of them, wouldn't you? Yeah, because here's the thing. Now, lest you be offended, I don't want you to be offended and think, this lady's accusing me of being biased. She thinks I'm, you know, a sexist or an ageist or a racist or something. What's up with this? Okay, before we get offended here, let me just do this quick poll here. Now, if you could just go ahead and identify yourself, because I know you're here with me today, so don't be embarrassed. Just holler it on out. Who's the person in this room, because I know you're here, who has the most wonderful, adorable, cute, talented children or grandchildren in all the world? Who are you? Yeah, really? Guess what? You're all right. Because you know what? It's perfectly okay that you're biased about your loved ones, about your life, your finances, your investments, your retirement, your home, your property value, your business, your job, et cetera, et cetera. The ethics law has never dictated, now that you are a city council member, you must deny your humanity and function as a robot. The ethics law doesn't expect that. It's not realistic. But here's what the ethics law does say. Okay, we're biased. We admit it. I'm biased. I'm biased about my family. I admit it. The ethics law didn't say I can't be biased. What the ethics law is telling us is we can't act on those biases in our official capacity as public servants. That's the crux and the heart of the ethics law. You know, I gave a speech a few months ago at the Ohio Veterans Home, which is up in Sandusky, Ohio. If you're not familiar with it, it's a facility that offers medical assistance to vets in Ohio. So I was there giving a speech, and I said, let's pretend that I worked here at the Veterans Home. And every day, I get a stack of files on my desk, and each file represents a veteran somewhere in the state of Ohio, and he or she is seeking some sort of medical assistance, surgery or meds or physical therapy, whatever. So I sit at my desk with two stamps in my hand. One says approved, one says denied. And I review each file, make a decision, and move on to the next file. And one day at this hypothetical job, I come across a file with a pretty familiar name. Now, I should disclose to you that my father, who I mentioned was born in the South Side in 1925, you can probably do the math there, is a World War II veteran. My dad turned 85 years old in February, and you can guess I'm just a little bit biased about my 85-year-old World War II daddy, right? So, here I am at my hypothetical job with my dad's file in front of me. Now, there are two warring sides of my brain here, arguing with each other, right? All right, this side of my brain is saying, all right, Susan, you have a legal and moral obligation of the taxpayers and citizens of the state of Ohio to make an objective decision based on the established criteria which protects the veterans who apply for these benefits as well as the taxpayers who fund the program for the benefits of these veterans. Right? Yeah. What's the other half of my brain saying? This is my dad. This is my daddy. This is not some faceless, anonymous veteran whom I will never know. This is my dad, and I'm telling you what, my objectivity goes right out the window, okay? Does that make me evil? That I'm biased about my 85-year-old dad. Does it make me evil? No, what's it make me? Human. Makes you biased, which means, guess what? Welcome to humanity if you are a biased human being. That's not illegal. But under the ethics law, what is, though, my obligation right then and there as this file sits in front of me? What is my obligation to the law? Yes, yeah. That I'm going to go back to my boss and say, hey, you might not have even realized, I realize you probably didn't know when this ended up my pile that this is my dad. We don't have the same last names. I've been married for 13 years, so this needs to go to somebody who has no idea who he is, that they don't realize that I'm, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It doesn't make our loved ones ineligible, you know, for these things. I mean, for all of you who are in city council, in particular, you may have possibilities of conflict because guess what? You live where you serve. You know what, truthfully, it's not always as challenging for somebody like if they work for the city of Columbus, but they reside in a township in another county, an adjacent county. Might not be as problematic for them. But for those of you that say, yeah, obviously I live where I serve, naturally, that's why this law is a good thing. Not because we want to restrict you. We don't want to wreck your networking. What we want to do is say, let's have it that the public, A, never has to question your personal integrity, or maybe even more importantly, the integrity of the process that your city engages in to serve the citizens of that community. That's why this law is a good thing. It's a positive thing. Please don't ever let anybody tell you it's about counting the cookies or wrecking your opportunities to reach out. Always let them know, no, this law is about protecting me, both as a public servant and as somebody who lives in my community who has the right to expect that government ought to be fair. So that's really kind of the why of why this law is in fact a good thing. So how does it break down? Well, one of the phrases that you hear a lot when people are discussing the ethics law is that phrase conflict of interest. Now, here's how the ethics law breaks down this area of conflict of interest. With all due apologies, if I have any lawyers in the room with me here, I'm going to throw two words at you that are not in the statute, so don't go looking in the statute for these two words. But there's a section of the code, 10203 D&E, that really reflects this conflict of interest provision of the ethics law. And this area of the law talks about public servants not using their authority or their influence to get things of value, or not securing, soliciting, or accepting things of value, not just for ourselves, but also for our families or for people that we're in business relationships with in our private lives, our clients at our company, our boss at our job, et cetera, et cetera. So when you look at these two areas of the statute, you think, well, they both talk about you can't use your public position to get something of value. They're the same thing, right? Those two sections, D and E. Here are the two words I'm going to throw at you that you won't find in the statute. This is the way in my fallible little brain that I keep them clear. Here's how I picture these two somethings of value. I think of them as tangible things of value and intangible things of value.